our discussion's around 12:30. We give 30 minutes for public comment. I think there are 11 people that have signed up for public comment. What I would like to do, I guess, very quickly, what's got the ball rolling, Mr. Southon, who's a member of our panel, was not able to be here today. He sent an email out, I guess, 2 weeks ago to the group, basically just saying, hey, I'm sorry I'm not going to be here. These are my 2 cents for discussion. And the genesis of his comments were, to him, it didn't seem fair that wineries were given certain rights to do things on their farm because they were a winery, that he, as a chicken producer, whatever other kind of farmer, was not allowed the same rights as a winery just because somebody grows grapes and sells wine. It's not fair. They can do certain things on their farm that other farmers can't. That was the genesis. Mr. King jumped in and offered up some comments and kind of pointed out some, not to speak for you, David, but just kind of talked about why the Farm Wineries Act came into place and kind of distinguished what separates wineries a little bit and some of the pressure they were on as a kind of an up-and-coming entity 10 years ago. And then Mr. Trumbo kind of weighed in as well. Then we decided that we want to make sure that all of our discussions are public for one, so we kind of nixed that a little bit. But what it got us thinking is, are there some components of the Farm Wineries Act that give certain protections to wineries? Are there parts of that that could be extrapolated to other sectors of agriculture? So that's kind of the question. Travis prepared some sample legislation just as a starting point that basically looks at some of the protections that our own farm wineries are given. What does that look like when we try to apply that to other sectors of agritourism or direct marketing or whatever? So that's kind of the genesis of where this came to be. This is certainly not intended to be a final document by any means, but it's a point of discussion. And so, Travis, I'll let you make any comments and just kind of however we want to walk through it and have some discussions. We've got about roughly 45 minutes or so for discussion on this, kind of bring it to a close and then have our public. Oh, I'm sorry. Travis and other folks.
This really is, I mean, you all are familiar with the Farm Winery Act. This really is an overlay of the term agricultural operations, which is defined in the Right to Farm Act. An overlay of that term into the Farm Winery Act. We've stripped out references to ABC code and special terms used there in the production of alcohol, because there's special code provisions there. But really trying to overlay the protections that are afforded to farm wineries, the privileges afforded to farm wineries to agricultural operations, trying not to go above and beyond that. But really, again, just overlaying it where we're putting in protections for usual, customary activities and events for agricultural operations. I think the restrictions shall be reasonable and take into account economic impact. There's reference made to regulation of noise. Then Section B deals with not treating private personal gatherings of the owner any differently than any other private personal gathering. And then Section C specifically deals with prohibiting regulation of any activities, any specific activities on agricultural operations, and taking directly from the Farm Winery Act, it's the production and harvesting of agricultural or silvicultural products, sale of food products from an inspected food establishment or exempt facility under 3.25130. That's a VDAC statute dealing with pickles, relishes, those types of things, and then the sale of agricultural or silvicultural related items that are incidental to the sale of agricultural or silvicultural products. So, it was part of our conversation in the last meeting to see what an overlay of ag operations on the Farm Winery Act might look like. That's our attempt at this. Again, it's not a position or recommendation of the administration or anyone else, simply a discussion document to see what it might look like and kind of pick through on the parties. So with that, we open up what people might think.
Can I ask a couple questions? reading through section C, the production and harvesting of agricultural and silvicultural products, would, in your opinion, have the interaction with that with the existing right to farm statute? Because, at least from my organization's perspective, we're very interested in making sure that whatever we do, we maintain that existing protection, even if we layer on additional protections for other activities. So can you help me understand from a legalese perspective what you think about that?
Well, they certainly don't conflict with one another. I don't think we have one section really conflicting with another. I don't have right to farm act next to it, so I don't know that one is more protected than the other.
I guess.
So I have to look at
Maybe
this.
specifically, I mean, no local ordinance regulating noise other than outdoor amplified music arising from activities and events at agricultural operations shall be more restricted than the general noise ordinance. To my knowledge, there's no ordinances right now on agricultural production activities regarding noise, and again, maybe it's kind of how we define what an agricultural activity is or an activity at an agricultural operation. If that's harvesting your crops, then to me, you actually could be creating a different level of restriction or allowing a locality actually to apply a noise ordinance to something that right now they can't further right to farm act.
Clearly, that's not the intent.
Right, I know, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're not heading down the path of taking away something that's already in the right to farm act. I guess that leads me to, and this has been, I'll say, my organization, we've had this discussion at least since the farm winery issues in 2005, 2006, of what and who this is. What are the activities and events on agricultural and forestry operations, and how do you define that? And once you start kind of opening that Pandora's box, what do you leave behind that you shouldn't, who's in, who's out, should there be a definition? So I raise that as a question maybe for feedback from the group as to if anybody else has figured out anything that might work, because we certainly have struggled with it.
Okay, you'll remember this, that subsection D of 2288 includes a long list of shall not regulate, primarily ABC laws that restricted local regulation of wineries because we're in the alcohol business. And what draft legislation intends to do is incorporate a list of do not regulate. I'm not sure it's appropriate in this particular one. Because again, we had a completely different issue with ABC regulations, came out of the Boston study group in 06, was incorporated as subsection T, all of that stuff, something that localities can't do because of ABC law, irrespective of what happens in locality law under 15, under section 15. So probably need to, just looking at it, the easy answer is to delete this subsection 3 or whatever it is here on the draft legislation, because that will confuse the issue. No question. And then to a secondary point, subsection I, which is virtually verbatim from 2288, usual and customary events and activities had nothing to do with all of those shall not regulate items under subsection A. So it's a completely different category. By using agricultural operations here, I think the draft language is going to confuse the issue precisely like Katie is suggesting. There needs to be some definition of what the usual and customary activities and events actually means before you could use the hammer of this subsection A language, which is very broad. And it is the same language that was in the winery report. I'm sorry, the winery code. But to both Farm Bureau and Mr. Land's position and Katie's position, there needs to be some separation of current agricultural operations and a completely different category of usual and customary activities and events, which back in the winery days, or the issues there, were very specific. The long list was very specific and had nothing to do with agricultural operations as they were defined at that time, and as I think they would be defined today. I have, by the way, Mr. Congo, these are my working papers on 06 and 07. It includes a long list of the usual and customary activities and events. It was an extensive list. The reason it was not incorporated in the legislation is that the plain language of 2288 makes it clear that the legislation is intended to look at the whole Commonwealth. It's actually the opposite of the viewpoint that you took in your email, which is that the localities at the time, some of which had no wineries, no intent that they would ever have a winery, still needed to have some options available to them. On the other hand, the localities that did have wineries and therefore had a long list of currently operating usual and customary activities and events, the attempt by the legislature was to throw all that in a pot and allow the whole Commonwealth, every county in the Commonwealth, to use this same broad language, admitted usual and customary activities and events, but not allow the individual locality to pick and choose. Otherwise, the legislation makes no sense. No reason to have it if the localities could decide what their usual and customary activities and events are. The reason that it's a code provision provided by the General Assembly is to actually prevent that. Phyllis Enrico from BECO should have, Mr. Land, extensive notes about this as well. I'd be happy to go through it. It's not the form of that, but just to get to the point of what's the difference between agricultural operations, Mr. Rogers, and production agriculture currently operating in days interested in for the purposes of Right Farm, completely separate group of activities than what was intended under the 15 to 2288. And we're a part of the study group, Secretary Fox's study group back in 06 and 07.
I'll make a couple of comments from my organization's standpoint, and I agree with several of David's sentiments about attempting to sort of redefine production of agricultural products in a different code section. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it would be keep it the same as is in 32/300, or keep it out of this sort of perspective. But having it in 15.2, I think, gives us an opportunity to potentially support something moving forward. And I think there's a lot of people in that same boat sitting here. What is going to be, I think, the devil in the details, and I don't think we're trying to go through this today with a fine-tooth comb, but I look at subsection 3 of Part C, and something that we wrestled with this past session with HB 1430, and I think what's really going to be the heart of the debate, not just internally, but we're trying to convince the legislature to support something like this, is the sale of agricultural-related items that are incidental to the sale of agricultural and silvicultural products. We've wrestled with incidental before, and I don't think any of us ever got a really clear answer, as it's not defined in the code. I know we're sitting there looking through Webster's, but as we move forward, I think the sale of those particular items, so it's not such a broad definition that you can drive a bus through, so that current farmers might be in danger of losing some of the current protections they have with sales. I think that's going to be the major debate moving forward. And second, and Katie mentioned this earlier, the big fear for my folks, and Martha, you mentioned Virginia Beach and Delegate Knight working on that, and you mentioned that during session. That is such a favorable position, not always, as Matt mentioned earlier, but I would hate for us to do something that would supersede what has been done at the local level, and that would have to be very, very carefully done if we were to move forward.
If I can just ask you a question, thank you, by the way, You had mentioned that you don't want to do anything that would affect current with regard to the sale of incidental items, the sale of agricultural, silvicultural products. Your concern is that it would affect production agriculture and what they're able to sell. Could you expand on that and what you mean by that?
I guess it's twofold.
How does it impact?
If I was to be clear, my membership also includes folks that do farm sales. If we open up something where incidental, to me, has always been a very broad definition that you can make a lot of products out there by your own definition incidental to production agriculture. I would hate for the locality that had been working with the farmer before, if other folks were to use that too broad of a definition, that they would make everyone get in trouble. And I see a couple of nodding heads because when you expand something so broad that others take advantage of it, you have the opportunity to use the protections that you already have.
I said this last time, when the food line came down the road, it went to the same valley. And I said, well, I just don't believe it. And then it just goes back. If someone's making a product and you want it, and they go there, they should be able to sell it. And we should figure out how we can make the road big enough for them to get there. And so, it's really, if people want to come to your farm and buy what you have, that should be encouraged. It shouldn't pass laws that make me go to the food line. I know a lot of people want to go there, and I support their right. So it's not about big farms, little farms. It's about the consumer saying, this is what I want, and this is what I would like to go to the farm.
And if I could just have a follow-up question for you as well. Isn't that addressed by the very words that are identified in number 3, wherein it says that the sale of agriculture or silviculture related items? So that therefore a tomato farmer can't start selling, airplanes and helicopters and, refrigerators. Likewise, just as the winery is able to sell winery related items. Has there been any incidents in the Commonwealth of Virginia of wineries selling anything since they've had the ability? No, there haven't.
I think we kind of make the same point in that we had such a good foundation already with the winery law. It was so well crafted that we didn't immediately jump in head first with something so broad that we didn't understand exactly what to do. And that's what I'm trying to make sure of.
I just wanted to point out, I wrote down what Ann Mallett said in her presentation, that selling canning jars for Cynthia Childs to be able to help people who purchase peaches and then want to be able to go home and can them, in her mind, at least, is incidental to the sale, but it is related to that income. But trinkets made in China are not. And the way that this is defined right now, I'm not sure that it says trinkets made in China are not incidental. Not that I have anything against China. Or any processing companies that make some products from China. But, yeah, exactly. But I think the point is, are
I think
you,
we're coming from the same
how
place.
do you define
No,
that?
I really do. But I don't know of many, is there a glass manufacturer in Virginia that makes, there is? So are all wine glasses made in Virginia? No. If a peach farmer has a peach orchard and wants to sell a t-shirt that says, come to Judy's Peach Orchard, here's a picture of it, that farmer is supposed to get a t-shirt made in Virginia that says,
I'm not saying that. I think what Ann said is, if it were the airplanes and the whatever else, that's what I heard her
But
say.
that's not related to agriculture, silviculture, airplanes.
Well, actually, I have producers who aerial spray their farms, so it is related. I mean, you can go, anything can be related, and I think that was part of, at least our concern during the General Assembly is anything inherently can be related to agriculture and forestry. We're sitting in a building right now, the floors are wood, these are wood. To be honest with you, when I speak to groups, I say, what did you eat this morning? Cheerios. Okay, well that's an agricultural product. Where did you take a shower this morning? In your house. Well, thank you forestry for helping build that. So I think if you take it out without carefully defining what this is, you can make the case for anything. You can make the case for every product that Walmart sells to be related to, in some way, shape, or form, agricultural, silviculture. Now, I know that may not be the intent of what Travis drafted, that all of you